Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sofia Caja, Senior Analyst at Climate & Company and the coordinator of the G20 Sustainable Finance for Nature and People project. On behalf of Climate & Company, the Post2020 Biodiversity Framework, European Union Support Project, and the German Institute for Economic Research, DIW, I would like to welcome you all. We have set up a Miro board to facilitate interaction with the participants. You can find the link to access the Miro board in the chat. For those unfamiliar with Miro board, you just need to hold the right mouse button down to move it around. On the Miro board, we will find relevant publications on the topics we will be discussing today, a section where you can leave questions to the panelists, and key messages will be taken there during the panels. I would also like to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. Thanks for sharing the Miro board, Clive. The webinar Making Sustainable Finance Taxonomies Work in the G20 to Achieve the Biodiversity Plan is an official side event of the T20, which is the G20 engagement group that brings together think tanks and research centers from G20 members and guest countries and organizations. This webinar is taking place in the framework of the project, the G20 Sustainable Finance for Nature and People, with the support of the Post2020 Biodiversity Framework, EU support project funded by the European Union and implemented by Expertise France. Nature-related disclosure, which is addressed by the Global Biodiversity Framework Target 15 and relevant policy instruments such as sustainable finance taxonomies, have played a central role in this project, due to its outstanding importance for mobilizing finance for biodiversity and ecosystem protection and restoration. This is the second of a series of webinars that aim to promote capacity building and share recommendations to the G20 and their respective member countries to implement sustainable finance instruments focused on biodiversity and nature, besides making progress with the implementation of the Global Biodiversity Framework. The first event took place in April at the Embassy of Brazil in Berlin, and you can also find the key messages from this first webinar at the Miro board. To officially open our webinar today, I would like to introduce Nicolas Chenet, Head of Sustainable Development of Expertise France. Thanks for joining us, Nicolas.
Yes, I think my name is not correct, but I'm Nicolas. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here today representing Expertise France as the implementing agency of the EU-funded project Post2020 Biodiversity Framework EU support. And since 2019, the project has been a strong advocate for ensuring the adoption and implementation of a transformative global biodiversity framework, and has facilitated the dialogues and mobilization on the topic of sustainable finance among various stakeholders, such as parties to the CBD, subnational and local governments, regional organizations, and the private sector. This is why we are happy to collaborate with Climate & Company to implement this activity, G20 Sustainable Finance for Nature and People. Together with key partners, the team dedicated to this activity has been able to organize several workshops, publish impactful policy briefs, and reach out to decision makers within the G20 to advance on the topic of taxonomies and corporate disclosure for biodiversity. Today, Expertise France and the Post2020 project are happy to welcome you together to this workshop dedicated to the topic of taxonomies and biodiversity with Climate & Company and the German Institute for Economic Research, and with the support of the platform CIPO, Institute for Climate and Society, Grupo de Finanzas e Investimentos Sustentáveis, Brazilian Alliance for Sustainable Finance and Investments, and CDP. As for the EU, within the broader policy package of the EU on sustainable finance that includes the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, the EU taxonomy provides a clear, agreed basis for classifying, disclosing, and labeling investment as environmentally sustainable. By doing so, it helps address potential financial sector greenwashing, as well as encouraging a shift of financial investments away from unsustainable economic activities to more sustainable ones. Furthermore, the EU Green Bond Standard creates a voluntary standard that defines a minimum requirement for green bonds and is closely tied to the taxonomy activities and criteria. The EU Green Bond Standard also establishes a registration system and supervisory framework for external reviewers of European green bonds. To prevent greenwashing in the green bonds market in general, the regulation also provides for some voluntary disclosure requirements for other environmentally sustainable bonds and sustainability-linked bonds issued in the EU. We wish you fruitful discussion and hope that with this workshop and the many upcoming activities, we can contribute to fostering sustainable finance instruments within the G20 for the benefits of nature and people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and congratulations for the amazing work that has been done through the Post2020 project and with the support of expertise friends. We apologize, we cannot, for some technical issues, to change your name here, so we apologize for that. Now let's move to the keynote presentation, where we aim to present the connection between sustainable finance taxonomies and the Global Biodiversity Framework. I'm delighted to have Francisca, Senior Researcher at DIW, our trusted and long-term partner, to share some insights on this with us. Please, Francisca, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot also for the opportunity of speaking here and discussing with you later on also in more detail. As Sophia said, I'm a senior researcher at DIW Berlin at the Climate Policy Department, and I'm also coordinating the German Sustainable Finance Research Platform, a project here in Germany. And I focus more on climate policy. So a lot of the insights are more sort of from the experience of climate policy and climate-related sustainable finance taxonomies, but we also looked into biodiversity aspects, and it's definitely an important topic which will be integrated more and more in sustainable finance taxonomies as we expect. And as on the next slide or first slide, we quickly want to give a short overview of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which has been agreed upon in 2022. And it contains 23 targets, the first of which are more really nature-related, biodiversity-related targets. One of the maybe most well-known ones is the 20 or 30% of areas and of land areas should be used in a sustainable way, or degradation should be reduced. And so this 30% target by 2030 is maybe one that people know from this Kunming Montreal Protocol. And then target 14 to target 23 are more about implementation. And here today we would like to focus a bit on or highlight these two targets that are highlighted here in red. Target 15 and target 19, which are really about reducing negative impact on biodiversity by business and finance. And here's also the reporting aspect, so that really companies and businesses should report their biodiversity related risks and opportunities. And target 19 is about increasing the level of financial resources for biodiversity. So in a way, it's a bit similar maybe to the climate targets. Here we also have these nature-related targets and then the implementation targets. And on the next slide, then I would like to sort of connect this to sustainable finance taxonomies. which are a classification system that should increase or help to increase transparency and offer guidance to financial actors. They aim at redirecting capital flows to more sustainable and environmentally friendly activities, and should be used for, or the idea is that they're used for sustainable financial products, but also for financial incentives and subsidies by governments, for example. And currently, most taxonomies focus on climate change, but they also include biodiversity, restoration, circular economy, waste reduction targets, and so on. And important for the implementation, which these are some points we found sort of in the development in the sustainable finance taxonomies that are more climate related currently, is that the screening approaches, and that targets should be science-based, and the thresholds need to be science-based and updated regularly. And it also needs reporting requirements. Otherwise, it's hard to actually find out sort of how far we are in reaching these targets. And then also international harmonization is very important. So on the next slide, I would like to quickly highlight a recent study we did at DIW, which we did together with two other colleagues of mine, Catherine Marchewitz and Fernanda Ballesteros. And we actually did a comparison or assessment of all taxonomies that are in either already published or developed or adopted, or in the development phase, so where a document has been published. And so you see already on the map, a lot of countries have already developed or already in a developing phase of taxonomies, and we also included here their climate target. It's not really biodiversity related right now, but the focus of the study was more on climate change and the contribution of these taxonomies to a net zero economy. But on the next slide, you can also see how sort of one of the criteria we looked into is how well embedded the taxonomies are in national and international environmental goals. And most taxonomies really refer to all relevant international frameworks, like the Paris Agreement for climate targets, but also the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and different other international but also national policies. And we also looked into which of the taxonomies have other biodiversity, but also social related aspects. And we can see that so far around 21 out of the 57 taxonomies we assessed already include or plan to include biodiversity related aspects. And the names are listed here, the names of the countries or the regions. And they are at different stages. Some have already very advanced goals and targets, and others are only included a bit more, more general so far. And with that, I would like to hand over to Sophia, who will go a bit more into detail on the biodiversity side. And I think the studies will be also put in the chat or in the Miro board. So you can find them.
Thank you so much, Francisca. So I want to focus a bit more on how to integrate nature-related aspects into taxonomies. So it can be done at least through two different ways. By defining nature-relevant environmental objectives, such as water conservation and biodiversity protection, and also by adopting environmental performance metrics and thresholds for priority sectors that substantially contribute to the nature-relevant environmental objectives, such as the FLO sectors and mining. For the definition of priority sectors that have an impact on nature, some tools can be used. For example, the UNEP UN Environmental Program and CORE tool can help understand the dependencies and impacts on certain economic sectors on nature. Other relevant contributions to the nature-relevant environmental objectives can also be included into taxonomies, such as land transportation and waste management. Some taxonomies, such as the EU taxonomy, also include do not significant harm criteria for nature-related objectives, which aim to prevent that economic activities that contribute to the climate objectives harm the nature-related ones. If you are interested in knowing more about these elements, you can check the report When Finance Talks Nature, published by Climate & Company and WWF at the end of 2022. It's available in the chat and also on the Miro board. It also presents an analysis focused on the G20 and the integration of nature-related aspects into sustainable finance taxonomies. Next slide, please. As already presented, sustainable finance taxonomies are important to enhance the shift of capital into biodiversity-related economic activities. Nevertheless, only a few taxonomies mandate that the market actors have to disclose their information on the alignment with the taxonomy, which help us understand their capital allocation to nature-relevant economic activities. The need to enhance transparency is what is addressed in the Target 15 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. The study published by DIW shows, we took this figure from this report, and it's again available in the Miro board and also in the chat. It shows that granular data on taxonomy alignment needs to be disclosed in most jurisdictions. However, since most taxonomies only focus on climate-related aspects, the disclosure on biodiversity-related data is still missing in most of them. This demonstrates the need to advance on the integration of biodiversity into taxonomies and mandatory disclosure as addressed by the Target 15 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Enhancing transparency consequently lowers the risk for investors and encourages more public and private capital flows into these nature-related economic activities, which supports achieving another target of the Global Biodiversity Framework, as mentioned at the beginning, the Target 19. Next slide. Thank you. Why should we focus on G20 countries to advance the integration of biodiversity into sustainable finance taxonomies? So it's because the G20 encompasses a unique mix of developed and emerging economies, as well as 8 out of 17 megadiverse countries. Therefore, the G20 as a forum plays an important role to develop comprehensive financing strategies aligned with nature-positive outcomes. When you look at the G20 jurisdictions, countries should further include nature-related aspects into their existing and developing taxonomies. Furthermore, an ambitious G20 mandate and roadmap is needed to facilitate policy dialogue on taxonomies aligned with the Global Biodiversity Framework. Yes, thank you so much. You can find some key messages from this keynote presentation on the Miro board. I think Clive is going to share the Miro to show to you where you can find the notes. Yeah, but feel free to navigate on the Miro board. Thank you. So now I want to hand it over to my colleague Daniel, project manager on taxonomy development and implementation projects at Climate & Company, to moderate the main session.
Thank you so much, Sophia, and also thank you to Francisca for these very important insights and key messages and making clear the connection between sustainable finance taxonomies and the Global Biodiversity Plan. So thank you so much for this. And also a big welcome from my side, and thank you for joining this webinar today. In the next session, which will be a panel session, we will give the stage to 4 representatives of various organizations and government institutions who will share their insights on how to make sustainable finance taxonomies work in the G20 in order to achieve the goals of the Biodiversity Plan. For now, we have 50 minutes, and our esteemed guests from Brazil, China, Peru, and the United Nations will have each 10 minutes to share their learnings and their recommendations on these topics. And afterwards, we will have a short discussion round between the panelists, which will be followed by a 10-minute Q&A session that will focus on your, and by this I mean the attendees' questions. So please feel free to put any of your questions into the Q&A box or also into the chat, and we will try to make sure to answer as many of them as possible live or in written. So next up, we have, first of all, Cristina Reis, who is having some technical difficulties to join us. So we will actually move to the next speaker, who is Santiago Lorenzo from the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. So Santiago is the head of the Climate Change Economics Unit at ECLAC, but he has also extensive experience in environmental economics, having previously worked as a global coordinator for climate and finance at WWF and as a director at Mexico's Ministry of Finance, and also served in other various international roles, such as the OECD. And Santiago holds degrees in economics and environmental diagnosis. Something interesting that relates to our topic today, which is sustainable finance taxonomy, is that Santiago is actually, or has been, part of the steering committee of the Common Framework of Sustainable Finance Taxonomies for Latin America and the Caribbean, which has been a very influential and important report when it comes to harmonization, interoperability of taxonomies. And such a buzzword that is being thrown around every now and then. So, but this has been very influential for the development of the taxonomies on a global sphere. And ECLAC, so the Economic Commission for Latin America, has also been working closely with the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. So we're especially eager to hear from your perspective, Santiago, and also your recommendations. Thank you so much for joining, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. Thank you very much. I will, talk about the taxonomies. And first of all, we need to know the challenge that implies to include taxonomy as a main parameter for taxonomy. So far, as was just said by Sophia, usually the taxonomy that has been climate focused, biodiversity is in the area of not significant harm, but move that to the main parameter of the of the taxonomy is really good as a tool for conservation in some economic activities who are the main drivers of the biodiversity loss. However, it's very challenging, and I will talk about that. So, and it is related also on why adaptation finance is not being delivered as mitigation. It's about very much on metrics, the challenge of metrics. So, well, but in to frame this, I wanted to make a reference on how the mainstream in biodiversity in economics has taken more time that we should like, but it's happening, and that's why the taxonomies right now are those in charge of the development of taxonomies are looking to biodiversity now. So there was an effort at the end of last century in the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, then the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, an effort by UNEP with Pavan Sardev leading that. IBS, the platform, the scientific platform of the CBT, also has made a lot of publications on arguments of why and should be more in the economic side biodiversity, and that's grouped a report that also has had a good impact. So there is increasing an awareness on the importance of ecosystems and biodiversity in the economics as a risk and as an opportunity. In that sense, it means we know that there are many instruments in greening the financial system, but also always the idea of having a taxonomy is like the foundation stone of a green financial system. It is key to transmit to investors what is green and not what is not green in the different economic sectors. So how to identify a green asset to invest in it. So taxonomy in that sense is important, and it's dynamic. Taxonomies you already know, and they need to be reviewed because we are talking the connection between the ecosystems, ecosystems, and that they evolve on time, and the markets that they have evolved in time. So we need to understand the relation between them and update it from time to time. So in that regard, there is a financing need, a financing gap on the biodiversity conservation that has been assessed several times. And the question is that the money is there. It's not about we need to fill in a gap. It is that the gap is there because the money that is going into hotspots, biodiversity hotspots, or even in booster zones of biodiversity, there is money going there, but it's going to have a negative impact. So we need to change the perverse subsidies that we already do. Then public and private finance needs to be sustainable. They go into these areas, and there is international public finance already going. So the gap, the money for filling in the gap of conservation and restoration, we have the money, so we need to redirect. And taxonomies is basic on that. Then what we are doing, as Daniel mentioned, the UN system, in a very rare, unfortunately very rare occasion of working together, we should do that, but this is very difficult. It's UNDP, UNEP, ourselves, IDB, World Bank, IFC, FAO, many, I think it's like 15 organizations that we're working together in the Common Framework for Sustainable Finance Taxonomies. Now, this year, we are developing an approach for introducing biodiversity in the Common Framework that already was published last year. This is a voluntary guide to try to make, as Daniel said, and I would have the same spelling problems on interoperability. We need to make them interoperability. That means and comparability. That means, what does that mean? For many investors, Latin America and the Caribbean is a region, an only region. And to understand each jurisdiction, criteria, methodology, etc., it brings transition costs. So if you have harmonized these methodologies, the trust that investors can have in the taxonomy is higher, and the transition costs are reduced. So that is why it's important that all Latin America and the Caribbean share the same methodologies, the same criteria, etc. So we promote that with this common framework. This common framework sets science-based criteria, principles, recommendations to define first the economic sectors and activities that should be highlighted in the taxonomy, because you know that will be trade-offs between this economic activity impacts more in climate change or in biodiversity. You need to understand that then to choose the main parameter if it is for climate or biodiversity. So the methodology should be there. So then the technical evaluation criteria with the main parameters, that is the most challenging work for biodiversity. Right now, the immediate reference that the Colombian taxonomy has is the land use change. We know that land use is a main driver for biodiversity loss. However, if you put land use change as a main parameter, if you improve productivity for land use, you are not reducing your pressure on biodiversity. You are making more efficient your production, but not necessarily you reduce the pressures over land use. So we need to make more complex parameters to really reflect what we want. So that's one of the main challenge, the parameter. We also need to understand other challenges that we have on front, because there are different services that ecosystems provide, and that's it. Not every single service will be reflected on the taxonomy. So in that regard, we have some real wider picture challenges as well. If we make the finance society, well, the finance flows to go to biodiversity thanks to the taxonomy, we will face one thing that the taxonomy cannot solve by itself, is that the engagement of indigenous peoples and local communities that has been critical actors so far. So that is an issue that the taxonomy will not cover, and they need to continue being a critical actor, particularly in Latin America and Caribbean. Another thing is that the tragedy of the horizons that Mark Carney mentioned is in biodiversity is particularly critical. The length of the cycles of recovery of the ecosystems are not are far larger than those that are for investors. So the return expected by investors are very short-sighted. So the tragedy of the horizon is, and that has implications on any activity, economic activity that is carried out in ecosystems. The asymmetries on information, power, and negotiation capacities between IPLCs and the financial sector is huge. So also there is a challenge there. And if the opportunities are sized in investing in biodiversity activities, related activities, we need to be aware of production scale and homogeneity of on the production. Because if you are successful investing in biodiversity, you want to produce more, and you will have those challenges. So, Daniel, I'm going well in time, yeah, because I'm lost you.
Yeah, if you could wrap up in a minute, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. So, and another challenge that will be in the operation of the taxonomy is the governability on rural territories. In Latin America and the Caribbean, many territories are not really under the state governance. So there are challenges of governability of any instrument on biodiversity. So we then, thinking on the taxonomy and the limits of the taxonomy, we have to recognize that there is a state responsibility that has to be the state. The government needs to really take on the responsibility on conserving, and a global responsibility that the services that provide ecosystems are global, and we need also to enhance the responsibility of other governments and the multilateral system, and that means us, United Nations. And the implementation phase for taxonomies is critical because it will bring the topic forward within the financial institutions and systems. So even we don't expect that's a position of ECLAC, not of all the group of institutions that are developing the taxonomy. We don't expect to have a solution, an immediate solution. We expect the taxonomy to be a process. It's a learning process, a process where the financial institutions will really size the problem of ecosystems and biodiversity in the economic space. But we see very difficult to have really a magic solution. So that we think this as a process. Most activities in biodiversity areas are not necessarily done through formal financial channels. We know that as well, and the taxonomy by definition goes into the financial formal channel. And in that sense, it's just another conservation and restoration instrument that will have an increasing impact over time, but not immediate. And yes, the metrics challenge we are really struggling with it now in the common framework. And I think also this challenge will be improved over time as well, because we are getting more information and data. Thank you very much, Stan.
Thank you so much, Santiago, for these really valuable insights. And especially I want to highlight here 4 points maybe that you just said, because these really were striking and very important. First of all, you just mentioned it again, the challenge of the metrics that we use in order to quantify biodiversity. How do we integrate this into taxonomies? It's very easy when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. We can quantify them very easily. We have metrics, but for biodiversity, it's quite challenging. And a lot of taxonomies have struggled with this as well. Also, international collaboration, very important that you mentioned this. There are a lot of good initiatives already in Latin America, but also in the Southeast Asian region, for example, with the ASEAN taxonomy, which is really trying to enhance this harmonization, the comparability. So thank you so much for adding that as well. And how can we make sure that social issues or that indigenous communities can be integrated into taxonomies as well? One of the next stages that we expect in the taxonomy development around the world. And with this, actually, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Cristina Reis. I'm very happy that you're here. Thank you so much for joining. And Cristina is the Undersecretary for Sustainable Economic Development at the Secretariat of Economic Policies at the Ministry of Finance in Brazil. She has master's and doctorate degrees in economics and currently leads the formulation of sustainable finance policies, such as regulation on carbon markets, but also the sustainable finance taxonomy in Sri Lanka. And since Brazil is currently holding the G20 presidency, and as I just said, is also developing their own taxonomy, we very, very much look forward to hearing from the Brazilian experience. So thank you so much for joining us today, Cristina, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I'm really sorry I'm late. And just to confirm, have we got translation from Portuguese?
Yes.
Too? Yes.
Exactly,
All right.
we have translation.
So
And everybody who would like to listen to the English version, please use the channel at the bottom, and then you can hear the English version. Thank you so much, Cristina.
I will wait everybody to change the language and to get into the translation. Muito obrigada, bom dia, é um prazer estar aqui com vocês. Eu vou falar em português, uma vez que eu represento o Brasil, tenho essa disponibilidade, e também vou poder dar muito mais detalhes sobre o nosso trabalho aqui em taxonomia e dividir com vocês o que o Brasil vem fazendo nessa agenda. Mas antes eu gostaria de cumprimentar os meus colegas de mesa, todos os painelistas, é um prazer estar aqui com vocês. Um abraço especial no Santiago, que já é um parceiro, um amigo que a gente vem trabalhando bastante juntos. E, bom, é uma alegria, né, que nós estejamos nesse momento do G20 falando em taxonomias. E dialogando sobre como as taxonomias podem ser interoperáveis. E essa interoperabilidade é realmente um desafio tão grande que o Azerbaijão, a COP29, já até apontou a necessidade de se operar um instrumento de interoperabilidade das taxonomias, e isso pode ser discutido logo mais em Baku, né? E no G20 temos o compromisso de entender as especificidades de cada país que precisam ser consideradas para entender as prioridades que são tomadas na elaboração de suas taxonomias, mas também garantir essa transposição, né? essa combinação, como o Santiago vinha explicando. Nós temos desafios que são globais, a mudança climática é um problema global, daí a importância de ser discutido no G20, e nós precisamos de instrumentos de finanças sustentáveis que lidem, então, tanto com o caráter global, né, das dificuldades, mas com as especificidades de cada país, que varia bastante. E aí eu vim trazer um pouquinho para vocês o que nós estamos fazendo aqui no Brasil, a partir do Ministério da Fazenda, com relação a essa pauta, especialmente a taxonomia, pensando muito tentando dividir bem esses desafios de trazer a biodiversidade para a taxonomia, mas bem como torná-la uma ferramenta útil para aquilo que é um desafio estrutural da economia brasileira, bem como de outros países em desenvolvimento, que é a superação da dependência tecnológica e financeira. Então, há muitos anos, pensadores da região da América Latina, muitos da própria ECLAC, CEPAL, que o Santiago aqui representa, vem discutindo as diferenças nas trajetórias de desenvolvimento entre os países do sul e do norte global e se aponta a questão estrutural da matriz produtiva como uma diferença crucial. É um desafio para o desenvolvimento sustentável dos países do dito sul global transformar sua estrutura produtiva, adensando tecnologicamente as suas cadeias de valor, aprimorando a sua inserção nas cadeias internacionais de valor, nas cadeias globais de valor, ao mesmo tempo a partir de nichos estratégicos, encontrando aquelas atividades e tarefas dessas cadeias que são condizentes com as suas vantagens competitivas e que vão poder gerar oportunidades de emprego e de renda para uma dinâmica macroeconômica sustentada, que não se caia ao longo do tempo e que elimine certas vulnerabilidades macroeconômicas dos países que, em geral, se observam e que ficam ainda mais agudas em tempos de crise, sejam crises financeiras, sejam crises resultantes da própria crise climática, como foi a pandemia entre 2020 a 2022, podemos dizer. Então, nesse sentido, a taxonomia brasileira foi elaborada, tem sido um processo que começou no ano passado, na administração do novo governo, contou com a elaboração de um plano de ação que foi submetido à consulta pública e lançado na COP28 em Dubai, em dezembro do ano passado. Esse plano de ação é um documento robusto que estabelece as prioridades, os objetivos estratégicos, os objetivos ambientais e climáticos, os objetivos econômicos e sociais, os setores a serem contemplados e também a sua fundamentação teórica. A taxonomia é um dos instrumentos de um projeto maior de país chamado Plano de Transformação Ecológica. Então, o Ministério, após ter liderado a reforma tributária no Brasil e o novo regime fiscal sustentável, também conhecido como arcabouço fiscal, traz o Plano de Transformação Ecológica como um conjunto de instrumentos financeiros, regulatórios, fiscais e de tributação que vão propiciar aos programas e ações do governo e também da sociedade, as estratégias corporativas, incentivos econômicos e financeiros para o desenvolvimento sustentável. E aí eu gostaria de chamar a atenção para o uso da palavra sustentabilidade no Brasil. Ela tem grande relação com biodiversidade, por exemplo, com as finanças verdes, mas ela traz em si os aspectos sociais. Então, todos os instrumentos que estão sendo formulados no âmbito do Plano de Transformação Ecológica aqui no Brasil, eles se colocam como instrumentos não somente para combater a crise climática e superar os nossos desafios ambientais, mas também para contribuir para superar os nossos enormes desafios econômicos e sociais, que vão desde essa mudança estrutural da matriz produtiva que eu vinha falando, como as questões que deixam uma população muito vulnerável, como a fome e a miséria. Então, não à toa, a presidência do Brasil do G20 elegeu o combate, uma aliança global combatendo a fome e a miséria como uma das prioridades e estabeleceu uma força-tarefa para isso. Estabeleceu também uma força-tarefa para debater mudança climática e uma iniciativa de bioeconomia. E essa iniciativa eu vou falar um pouquinho também, se lhe der tempo aqui. Mas pensando nesse contexto, é que se fica mais clara a intenção da taxonomia sustentável brasileira. Então, ela tem 3 objetivos estratégicos, quais sejam proporcionar uma trajetória de desenvolvimento sustentável, proporcionar o adensamento tecnológico da matriz produtiva brasileira e, por fim, promover um fluxo transparente e íntegro das informações, combatendo, assim, o greenwashing. Os objetivos estratégicos ambientais e climáticos da taxonomia sustentável brasileira são 7, incluem mitigação, adaptação, uso do solo e da terra, a promoção da biodiversidade, então a biodiversidade é um objetivo ambiental e climático, a questão da água, dos resíduos e da energia, e os objetivos econômicos e sociais passam por geração de trabalho decente e renda com aumento da produtividade, redução das desigualdades de gênero e raça, redução das desigualdades regionais e do território, e a promoção de serviços sociais para a qualidade de vida, garantindo, assim, que a população tenha seus direitos humanos, direitos básicos de cidadania fornecidos. Então, esses são os 11 objetivos da taxonomia e foram escolhidos como prioridades nessa primeira fase da taxonomia, 5 deles, quais sejam a mitigação, a adaptação, o uso do solo e da terra e o combate de desigualdades de gênero e raça e regionais. Em março desse ano foi lançado o decreto que organizou a governança da taxonomia. Nós temos uma governança muito complexa, com cerca de 200 pessoas participando dos grupos de trabalho da composição da taxonomia sustentável brasileira, sendo um comitê deliberativo interministerial com a participação dos reguladores do Sistema Financeiro Nacional, Banco Central, CVM, SUSEP, Previc, e também o Banco Nacional de Desenvolvimento Econômico e Social, o BNDES, tem um comitê supervisor que é mais enxuto para garantir a operação dos trabalhos técnicos, o cumprimento do cronograma, e os grupos técnicos. E aí são 8 grupos setoriais que vão olhar para a indústria de transformação, para a indústria extrativa, e esse é um desafio que a taxonomia sustentável brasileira encarou. Em outras taxonomias, esse setor não costuma entrar. Também o setor rural foi incluído na taxonomia sustentável brasileira, e aí estamos falando de agricultura, pecuária, floresta e pesca, além dos setores de energia, setor de construção, setor de transportes, de saneamento e de serviços sociais, aqueles serviços que são importantes para a sustentabilidade. Perdão. Entre esses serviços estão turismo, comunicação, informação, tecnologia da informação e planejamento urbano e territorial. Além disso, temos um grupo temático para discutir desigualdades e um grupo temático para discutir o dito MRV, né? Monitoramento, relato e verificação. Então, esses grupos estão trabalhando e a perspectiva é de que até novembro, a COP esse ano, lancemos a taxonomia para consulta pública.
Thank you so much, Cristina. Thank you.
No,
I think this was a very good.
Sorry.
If you could wrap up in 1 minute, that would be very good. Thank you so much.
I will wrap up. Mas aí o que eu gostaria de dizer por final é que a temática da biodiversidade, embora seja um objetivo estratégico que não está contemplado no momento como prioridade para a taxonomia, será depois, e tem que ser e deve ser um esforço entre países, pelo menos os megadiversos. Então, nós estamos em conversas com a Colômbia, com o México, com o Peru, com a Indonésia, para tratar da importância de nós, do sul global, que temos essa megadiversidade, biodiversidade, liderarmos essa agenda internacionalmente. E esse é o recado principal que eu gostaria de trazer aqui, desde um ponto de vista latino-americano.
Thank you so much, Cristina. Really, really valuable also for us. And also thank you again for stressing the point, the international collaboration that is important in order to move the agenda ahead. And what I would also like to mention, something that you said in the beginning, was that every country has their specific conditions that are important also to take into consideration for the taxonomy, that each country has their own development trajectories, and that it's important to reflect this as well when developing a taxonomy, integrating certain objectives, certain sectors. So thank you so much for mentioning this. And of course, the social aspect. This is something that we've heard from Santiago already once right now. Now, Cristina, you have also mentioned this. So this also seems to be one of the pressing issues that are connected also to biodiversity loss and its impact on social aspects. So thank you so much for mentioning this. Now we would like to move on to José Luis Ruiz Pérez. He is from Peru and a sustainable finance expert. He has previously advised the German Development Corporation, the GIZ, and the Peruvian Ministry of Environment in the development of the Peruvian taxonomy, and does not only bring expertise on different sectors to the table, but also in-depth knowledge on financial sector reforms. And he is working at the Universidad del Pacífico in Lima, Peru. And now you might be wondering, well, are we talking about G20, but why is Peru here? Yes, indeed, Peru is not part of the G20 countries, but still it is a very mega diverse country, has a lot of biodiversity, and therefore also a lot of learnings to share with the G20 in regard to biodiversity finance and the Global Biodiversity Framework, the Biodiversity Plan. So thank you so much, José Luis, for joining us, and we look forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel, for the presentation. I don't know, you put the expectation too high with all the learning that I will share with you. One challenge that has come in third position is that I have to thank Santiago and Cristina, but also they have put so many topics, very important topics on the table that well, I am kind of restricted here, but I will try to give some ideas. Thinking about the title of this event, how we make sustainable finance taxonomies work to achieve the goals of the biodiversity plan. I think we have to start by thinking how ambitious we are thinking about sustainable finance taxonomies linked to biodiversity goals. Because coming from Peru, as Daniel mentioned, we have realized that many of the biodiversity threats or threats to biodiversity comes from activities that are not linked to the financial system, like illegal activities or small peasants or indigenous peoples that are not linked to the financial system. So we have here one problem of financial inclusion that comes before we talk about how sustainable finance taxonomy could help in moving their ways of producing and consuming to a more sustainable pathway. So if we are talking about financial inclusion, one key actor here in terms of how we implement or deploy these sustainable finance taxonomies are microfinance institutions, because they are closer to these small producers. They are distributed in locations near these biodiversity hotspots. So we should think about how we can include them in this distribution of financial resources that we are looking for to achieve global target 15. So I think we should think about how our definitions, and well, Santiago was clear about all the challenge linked to metrics, how we move these definitions to a framework that could be used at this small scale microfinance loans or credit. That's one issue that is very important if we talk about some countries that are mega diverse, but this loss of biodiversity is not linked to big scale enterprises or activities. Linked to this idea of how we create a taxonomy that is useful for these small financial institutions is a more general topic about the usability of taxonomies. We do not want a great sustainable finance taxonomy that is not implemented or that financial institutions do not use to develop this financial product. So here, when we talk about the usability of taxonomy, we have this dilemma. We want a taxonomy that is easy to use, but is less ambitious in terms of how we create these criteria to discriminate which companies are performing in a way that is compatible with our biodiversity target and which not. Or we create a taxonomy that is more ambitious, but then it becomes hard to use. At the end of the day, we have to remember that we are creating a mechanism that has a lot of similarities with a voluntary mechanism. Financial system could choose if they want to create a financial product which is taxonomy compliant or not. So there is some trade-offs here that we have to think about in terms of we want to create more sustainable credits with the risk of greenwashing, or we want to make strict rules and have less financial products in that direction. And linked to this idea of usability, we have to be aware of the transaction cost of implementing a taxonomy, because at the end of the day, if we create criteria, specific guidelines, performance metrics, or thresholds, we have to be aware that there should be some institution, some organization, some agency that performs the role of verification, monitoring, certification of this performance. So at the end of the day, we also have to look at the ecosystem of all the availability of support organizations that could facilitate this dialogue between a financial institution who could not have any knowledge or have very little knowledge about biodiversity metrics, and a company that maybe could have this knowledge, but also have some conflict of interest. So we need the third party. We need a referee that says if some enterprise is performing in a good way related to these thresholds or not. So the availability of these support organizations should be taken into consideration, and the cost of this certification. Who will bear the cost? At the end of the day, if we create these financial flows linked to biodiversity, if we can create a reduction, a decrease in the cost of capital that is good enough to cover for this additional cost in terms to access to this financial resource. So there is this trade-off, and at the end of the day, when we are talking about creating new standards for making more transparency for this financial flow, we have to take into consideration who pays the bill at the end of the day. If we want business with good environmental performance, well, there should be this consideration about how we facilitate all these new services that we need to favor this transparency and avoid greenwashing. At the end of the day, I think, and taking some of the ideas that were said before, I think it is important to think about governance most of this work of creating certifications could be performed by public sector, by subnational governments, but then we need the capacities built around them, and also these checks and balances to favor the transparency of the whole system. We also have to take into consideration, as Cristina mentioned, that we value biodiversity by its uniqueness. So it's a huge challenge to create standard rules to value something that is unique. So good luck with that work. I think it's very, very difficult. And well, we are learning on the go, so we have to remain adaptive and try to include as much as we can of the new developments that we are finding every day in different aspects, and also to take into account what is coming from the financial disclosure from the companies in terms of, well, first climate change, but now we are talking, I think, more seriously about biodiversity and also water, which makes this triangle, climate, biodiversity, and water, that we need to take into account in order to think about sustainability in the near future. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, José Luis. What I especially take away from this is, first of all, what you said about the link between the sectors that are especially important for biodiversity and their link to financial services. It's really about financial inclusion, that we make sure that smallholders, indigenous people are actually able to access these kind of services. SMEs, and a lot of these taxonomy developments, SMEs have also not been fully integrated yet. So I think this is one of the most important aspects, one of the important messages that I took from your presentation now. And also the financial disclosure, of course, is very important in order to understand also where is the capital flow actually going to? Is it going to biodiversity-friendly economic activities, or rather not? And this will actually help facilitate this kind of dialogue. So thank you so much for this. Now, finally, I have the pleasure to introduce Xinyuan. She is a researcher at the Center for Nature-Based Solutions at the Institute of Finance and Sustainability in China. So this is a Chinese think tank. We're changing our gears a little bit from Latin America, are going to Asia, to China at the moment. And Xinyuan is specializing in policy analysis, research, and project management related to biodiversity finance. And she holds a master's degree in nonprofit management from the University in Hong Kong, and has a wealth of research and practical experience when it comes to sustainable development. IFS, so the Institute of Finance and Sustainability, has been actively engaged in supporting the development of sustainable finance taxonomies around the world, and has been leading the Capacity Building Alliance of Sustainable Investment, which has been created in response to the G20 making capacity building a top priority. So Xinyuan, we're very happy to have you on board, learning from your experience as well, and we look forward to hearing your inputs. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Daniel, and for your introduction. And thank you, Climate and Company and the Post2020 for inviting IFS to join this important discussion. And hello, everyone. For those who are not familiar with us, IFS is a Beijing-based think tank specialized in the issues of natural capital, biodiversity finance, ESG investment, and low carbon transition. Starting from 2022, we have been facilitating the task force on biodiversity finance in China to conduct forward-looking research and pilot projects. Our work covers biodiversity-related risk management, innovative financial products, financial incentives, information disclosure, and international cooperation. And taxonomy is also is also an important topic that we focus on, and we hope to help policymakers incorporate biodiversity into the system of sustainable finance taxonomies. And this year, the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group has started to focus on the importance of nature-based solutions, the synergies between climate change and biodiversity, and the important role of the financial sector, which we think is a good start, and we hope to see more of this type of dialogue happening among G20 countries. And I will, firstly, I will provide an overview of the current status of green finance taxonomies in China. China has made significant progress in the development of green finance taxonomies. In recent years, China has actively promoted the construction and application of green finance taxonomies to facilitate sustainable financial development. In April 2021, the PBOC, the People's Bank of China, together with other ministries, issued the Green Bond Endorsed Project Catalog, which further expanded the scope of supported projects and took into account the coordination with international green project taxonomies. And this year, government departments issued the guidance catalog for green and low carbon transition industry, which optimized and improved the structure and coverage based on the catalog 2019 edition, further enhancing the guidance and practicability of the catalog. And a new subsection on biodiversity conservation was incorporated, aiming to promote the coordinated development of green and low carbon industries with biodiversity conservation, and to guide financial institutions to direct funds towards green projects. And at the local level, China has also taken important steps, like this year, IFS and the local government of Yantai City jointly released the Yantai Blue Industry Investment and Financing Support Catalog, aiming to help local government and financial institutions accurately identify blue industries and related economic activities, and to mobilize more financial resources to support marine ecological protections. And I will also provide a detailed introduction for this case later. And these taxonomies provide guidance for financial institutions and enterprises, encouraging them to consider environmental factors in investment and financing decision. Despite achievements in green finance taxonomies, China still faces some challenges. Firstly, I think is the insufficient nature and biodiversity related information disclosure, along with issues such as data gaps. This limits investors and financial institutions' ability to accurately assess the environmental impact of projects, thereby affecting the market performance of green finance products and investor decision-making. And secondly, the challenge of aligning with international taxonomies. Globally, sustainable finance taxonomies have not yet been unified, and there are differences between China's green finance taxonomies and international taxonomies in some areas, which brings inconvenience to cross-border investment and financing. And lastly, I think is market acceptance and technical barriers also restrict the effective implementation of sustainable finance taxonomies. For instance, although relevant taxonomies provide clear guidance for green projects, in practice, some financial institutions still face difficulties in identifying and assessing the environmental benefits of projects due to the lack of sufficient technical support or professional talent. Regarding the opportunities, I think I would like to elaborate the following 3 aspects too. First, China has elevated biodiversity conservation to national strategy, laying a policy foundation for the incorporation of biodiversity into the formulation and implementation of green finance taxonomies. At the same time, China's has some pilot projects, and because of the time's up, so I think I need to share the important case sharing. So I think that there is also a case study in China I just mentioned, that is FS and Yantai City released Yantai Blue Industry Investment and Financing Support Catalog, which for the first time compiled a qualitative and quantitative indicator system for marine related industry. As we all know, marine biodiversity is one of the important guarantees for human survival and development. Not only can provide a large amount of food, medicine, and but also plays a crucial role in maintaining the ecological balance of the Earth in terms of climate regulation and species genetic resources. So by setting 4 blue economy-related diversified environmental and social benefits targets and 4 guiding principles for defining blue economy activities, the catalog provides a direction for investors to accurately support sustainable blue industries. And last, as for the recommendations, I would like to offer some view from the perspective of Chinese think tank. Firstly, G20 countries need to accelerate the establishment of a sound information disclosure system and improve data quality. Because from the perspective of the global situation, although the existing information disclosure taxonomies have incorporated nature and biodiversity, the current practices of countries in this area is still in the exploratory stage due to the challenges of insufficiently mandatory information disclosure, lack of consistency in disclosure across different countries and regions, and lack of accuracy and completeness due to missing data and information. And secondly, we suggest that G20 countries strengthen the construction of the sustainable finance taxonomy system, including improving green finance taxonomies and expanding the use of the China-EU Common Ground taxonomy. Meanwhile, it is also necessary to further enhance the application of the China-EU Common Ground taxonomy. And additionally, lastly, G20 countries should actively participate in the formulation of international sustainable finance taxonomies. And I think through these efforts, the G20 countries will play a more active leading role in the field of global sustainable finance and promote the realization of a biodiversity plan. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Xinyuan, for all of these recommendations already in the end. So you're giving us a perfect bridge also to move into the next section. Before we do that, though, I still wanted to highlight one important thing that you also mentioned, which was the missing data. That is one of the issues why investors have a very hard time making sound decisions when it comes to their investments into biodiversity, for example. So this one point, the missing information, the little nature-related disclosure would need to be improved, and you already added your recommendation there as well. So thank you so much for this point, for stressing this. And with that being said, we would like to move to one of the questions for the panel round discussion. And this is exactly on the point of recommendations or specific action when it comes to biodiversity integration into sustainable finance taxonomies in the G20 in order to make the biodiversity plan work. So my question would be to the round, and we, if possible, we could maybe start with Cristina first. I would like to ask, what kind of practical strategies or initiatives could the G20 propose in order to adopt or advance the agenda of integrating biodiversity into sustainable finance taxonomies? As you are currently working on the taxonomy, I think this could be a good starting point. Thank you so much, Cristina. We are currently, I'm not sure if we're hearing you. Yes. Cristina, could you check your audio? You might, maybe it works now. Could you test? No, unfortunately not. Maybe there might be a headset problem. Unfortunately not. Maybe while we give you your time to, while we give you your time to fix the technical issue, should we move on to Santiago? If you have any specific recommendations or strategies, initiatives for the G20, how to advance the agenda of integrating biodiversity into sustainable finance taxonomies.
Thank you. Thank you. And also thank you, Xinyuan, José Luis, and Cristina. It's really great to share this panel with you. Well, the G20 is a multilateral body. It's very difficult to have a consensus because it represents very different approaches to each problem. However, I think they, as Xinyuan and Cristina mentioned, the G20 is already recognizing the importance of nature on finance, and also from many years ago, the importance of taxonomies. So linking these two already agreed pathways for work, I think the idea to promoting cross collaboration between countries. Also, one of the, for me, seminal documents that Sustainable Finance Today Working Group made included a topic about publicly available environmental data. So the G20 has already addressed the need for increasing availability of relevant data for screening the financial system. And I think these three topics are linked very much. If we want the nature topics to go into the taxonomy, there is a possibility methodologically, but the problems of really getting that into place is very linked with the local dimension of biodiversity. So biodiversity is a global common good as an abstract, but biodiversity in allocation is a very concrete set of features. So, and the condition of biodiversity in that place, the condition of economic activities in that place is very, very local. So the need for granular data is important, and therefore also to have a common understanding of capacity creation, capacity building among peers. It is important in the G20. So the G20 can really make a lot of work on framing the topic rather than solving that. So a taxonomy is a jurisdiction matter. We are aiming to have a common ground among different countries in the region, etc. But it's really about that jurisdiction. But the jurisdiction will be able to size a taxonomy on biodiversity if it has the capacities. José Luis mentioned that if you don't have the operational capacities in your financial system, a very accurate taxonomy, very meaningful taxonomy will not deliver. So it's the G20 can really push the pieces forward in capacity creation and peer review, peer support, and driving to the process of further knowledge and more data. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Santiago, for mentioning this. Thank you. Maybe moving to trying again with Cristina, if she could share some insights also from the Brazilian side on this question of specific strategies or initiatives for the G20 to advance on the agenda.
Tá ótimo. Agora me escutam?
Yes. If you could maybe use 1 or 2 minutes.
Rapidinho, a minha resposta é parecida com a do Santiago, a minha resposta com relação à agenda de dados. E aí, como foi muito bem dito anteriormente, temos uma dificuldade de mensurar a biodiversidade. E esse é um desafio que deve ser comum, né, de encontrar formas de mensurar a biodiversidade e também como integrar o povo do seu território. As atividades econômicas da bioeconomia, da sociobioeconomia elaboradas no território. Para dar um exemplo rápido, quando um grupo indígena vende um produto, ele está vendendo o valor adicionado daqueles que trabalharam naquele produto, mas também de toda a comunidade que dividiu-se em tarefas para realizar a comida, cuidar das crianças, preparar as rezas, a sua cultura, de forma que o que precisa ser remunerado são todas essas atividades desempenhadas por todas as pessoas, e não somente o produto. E essa é uma das grandes dificuldades da nossa agenda de biodiversidade e sociobioeconomia.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cristina, for this input. Due to time, we already unfortunately need to close the session, but it really shows there's so much to talk about, so many initiatives, and we've received your questions. So thank you so much for this. The ones that we haven't answered, we will try to make sure to send a follow-up in the debrief of this webinar. So rest assured, your questions are not forgotten. They will be answered. And thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you so much to the speakers for all of your insights. And with this, I hand over to Sophia. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Daniel, and the speakers for such a great session. As already mentioned, the topic of biodiversity, its integration into sustainable finance frameworks and alignment with the Global Biodiversity Framework should be a top priority in the G20 as a forum and also in its individual jurisdictions. The discussion definitely does not end here. So stay tuned for the upcoming events organized by the G20 Sustainable Finance for Nature and People project, developed with the support of the Post2020 Biodiversity Framework EU support project, funded by the European Union and implemented by Expertise France. The next event will take place at the New York Climate Week, and we are looking forward to announcing an event at the Biodiversity COP in Colombia soon. Thank you very much.